Alright shippers, a lot of you guys have been asking for this one. It's FrostIron, or Iron Frost, the pairing of Loki Laufeyson and Tony Stark. This is Shipper's Guide to the Galaxy, and let's get started. Thanks to all the people who requested this, and for your patience. The Marvel Universe has surged forward to become one of the most participated in fandoms out there across multiple mediums, and that means that on top of merchandise and canon works across many media formats, there are tons of transformative fan works and a lot of pairings. One pairing that has been around for quite a while now is the aforementioned FrostIron, a pairing that baffled many by commencing before the two ever shared their charged scene in the first Avengers film. In order to find out how this pair took off, let's quickly meet the players. Loki Laufeyson, second son of Odin, a prince unaware of his true heritage as a frost giant and how it informs some of the key differences in himself and his abilities that have kept him apart from others. Talented and cunning, Loki's skills often go unnoticed due to the admiration of physical prowess favored by Asgard. Over time, this coupled with Loki's own insecurities have made him bitter and jealous and rendered him near incapable of judging his own worth, instead seeking the validation of others. This coupled with the large betrayal by those he had trusted leaves him jaded and cynical, yet there is a kindness and vulnerability to him that is masked beneath the layers and layers of deceit that are his namesake. Loki skyrocketed to mainstream popularity with the release of Thor in 2011 for a couple of reasons. One, his story within the film was very relatable to many, and for some it was more so than the actual protagonist, Thor. Loki is an underdog, underappreciated by those around him despite possessing some very good qualities. He's jealous of seeing someone with some obvious character flaws get all the recognition, and it's his own negative feelings that get him into trouble. These are feelings a lot of people can relate to. A lot of people have at times felt inferior to people who do not seem worthy, and sometimes that desire to get even pushes people to do some not exactly fantastic things. On top of that, there is the wounded character syndrome that compels some to feel the need to fix him. They'll show him he's worth it. Don't cry, Disney Prince Loki. The fangirls are here to save you. Also, Tom Hiddleston showcased himself to be a very likable actor, which translated both on-screen and off, which for some reinforced their love of the character in a cyclical relationship that led to both actor and character becoming fan favorites. Next up, Tony Stark, who we talk about all the time here on Shipper's Guide, an insecure genius masking his flaws behind arrogance, guilt-ridden and seeking to atone for past actions. Tony is extremely loyal to his friends, though that can be overridden by his sense of duty. Still, he wishes to belong, often feeling like an outsider even though he often has no reason to. A troubled childhood and series of devastating betrayals have left him slightly traumatized and cautious about opening himself up to people. Despite this, he still strives to make the world a better place. Before these two ever shared screen time, some fans felt there were some striking similarities between them, both coming from seemingly gilded upbringings, and yet their pasts are both complex and surprisingly unhappy. Both were betrayed by their father figures, both are incredibly insecure despite oodles of talent, both have been left physically altered by their experiences, though for Loki, he was always blue, it was simply being masked. That aside, both are looking for people to genuinely accept them, but are so cynical they rarely take it at face value when that is actually happening, and can be prone to lashing out if they feel threatened. When Loki fell at the conclusion of Thor, it provided an excellent narrative opportunity for film fans to have the two meet. Honestly, Loki falling is a very popular starting point for a lot of Loki pairings. Some ideas included Loki loses his memory and falls to Earth only to encounter Stark, and the two hit it off as there is often the assumption that given Loki's magical abilities, he would be adept at helping Tony with his inventions. Also, there is the idea that Tony would be intrigued by Loki's magical abilities, for science and magic go hand in hand in the Marvel Universe.
Your ancestors called it magic, and you call it science. Well, I come from a place where they're one and the same thing.
With the Avengers release in 2012, the two actually shared screen time and a new dynamic was established. One of the criticisms leveled against the film is that Loki is not a menacing enough villain. Instead, many view him as just a whiny brat with daddy issues, and a serious case of sibling rivalry. However, some viewed this as a very true characterization of comic Loki, who can be dangerous but can also be mischievous. This can be seen reflected in the interaction between Stark and Loki on screen, in that there is a casual ease to the scene that fueled shippers who were already low-key shipping them, terrible pun intended. For some, it fed into the belief that the two already knew each other, and for others, they simply found the scene where Loki attempts to take control of Tony to be charged with some intense UST. It was this moment that really caused the ship to explode, and many tropes were born, such as enemies with benefits fics, or the enemies with benefits that leads to more fic, Loki being drawn to Tony due to his inability to control him and curious about the tech in his arc reactor, or also being drawn to him as of the Avengers, Tony can be the most aloof at times, and there are many fics of him appearing in Tony's lab. There is a darkness and secrecy to Tony that lends credence to the idea that Loki could be visiting him and he would indeed say nothing. There are dark fics involving Loki being tortured by the Chitauri as was threatened within the film and escaping, only to somehow fall into the care of Tony, who would nurse him back to health. These fics tend to rely heavily on the idea that going back to Asgard or handing Loki over to Thor would not be the best idea for him. Then there are also fluff pieces of Tony loving Loki's Jotun form. And oh, of course, there is so much smut. Even more still, there's Loki popping up in disguise as Lady Loki to accompany Stark to events. This is another interesting one, and brings in the much-loved Lady Loki from the comics, as some would argue Loki spends an equal if not greater amount of time in his female form. Loki is a shapeshifter, so he moves between male and female forms as well as other forms with great ease, which affords an excellent in-universe opportunity for those fickers who want to explore gender-fluid characters or explore different facets of gender identity in a narrative setting. Some other fics come out of the fact that some who enjoy the Thor comic may also be fans of Norse mythology in general, and thusly many of those legendary elements can find their way into fics, key amongst them being that Loki has several children, which figures enjoy playing with as it opens the door for Mpreg, which does not necessarily have to follow Alpha Beta Omega dynamics as Loki is a shapeshifter. The Mpreg can go either way, but lends itself more to Loki for canon sticklers, and accounts for many great Who Knocked Up My Brother fics with Thor, wherein this is how the relationship is revealed to the rest of the Avengers. Alternatively, as the domestic Avengers tag really boomed after the first film, there is another scenario wherein Loki is popping up to annoy the Avengers and they all notice that he really gravitates to Tony, and so they all get together and try to make it happen, as redemption arcs for Loki are another popular style of fic. One of the reasons so many gravitated to this ship is, as can be seen by the above brief mention of different style fics, there is the potential for many different types of stories with these two. Here's another one. Tony is sealed into the void of space, and doesn't fall back to Earth at the end of the Avengers. He's picked up by the Chitauri, who make good on their promise to also recapture Loki. The two either escape together, or Tony finds himself at Loki's mercy, because what's any pairing without a dash of BDSM? Another thing that makes this ship unique is that it has grown and changed with the characters, and as the characters have evolved within the Marvel Filmverse, the stories and art have updated themselves with each change. For example, there are many post-Civil War FrostIron fics, with Loki coming to comfort Tony in light of what has happened, Loki being one of the perfect people to understand friends seemingly turning their backs on you. And of course, there's always the opportunity for Dark Tony, which is a terrifying and intriguing prospect. The idea that these two could understand each other in ways different characters couldn't really resonates with some people. The idea that Loki may not like Steve because he reminds him of Thor, particularly in how people treat him, or Tony being able to see through Loki and Thor's family dynamics and understand that there is indeed some intense friction there and why it would be in place. Basically, there's just a lot of options. The actors who portrayed these two showcase their easy chemistry on screen and off. The actors seem friendly, particularly on social media, where their antics continue to this day and are almost guaranteed to get a chuckle out of fans. For those who inform their ships based on actor relations, as well as canon occurrences and postulations, this can keep the two in the forefront of their minds and this ship fresh and exciting. As for the comics, these two didn't interact that much, unless it was battling or antagonistic, and Lady Loki paired with Doom may have picked up more traction, or Thorky, or Loki and Lorelei, or even Loki and the Enchantress, while Tony found himself paired with Steve following the heartbreak of the comic crossover event Civil War. For this pairing, it owes a lot to the filmverse, which really helped to jumpstart fan activities within the Marvelverse in general, or at least expand them to a much bigger level than they were already. Though many fics do find themselves informed by events that occur within the comics. So those are some of the reasons for, but why would you not ship these two? Well, while many connect with these two characters, some simply do not. When any character becomes as popular as Loki, you can imagine the backlash much, and the antis are just as fervent in their dislike as the fans are with their favor. Some people view Loki as whiny and dangerous, not fit to be paired with any Avenger who needs to keep that muzzle on and stay in Asgardian prison, while many don't think Tony's arrogance is a facade and see him as a jerk, whose track record with relationships hardly makes him a likely candidate for a stable one. And note that he can have some bullying tendencies of his own, which can be reminiscent of Thor, which unless you're a Thorkey shipper, many do not imagine Loki wants to experience again. Side note, there's a lot going on with Thorkey as well. It too is a complex, intriguing ship worthy of a vid. Alas, however, these two ships often found themselves as the battlegrounds for some intense shipping wars. As a result, there can be some character bashing on the sides of people who ship either side, but that is a discussion for another day. In terms of FrostIron, oversaturation was also a factor for some people. There is simply too much attention lavished on these two for some people to handle. They want more Black Widow, or heck, even more Cap, who basically saw his third movie turn into Avengers 3. From a couple standpoint, hero and villain is not for everyone, and some feel that Loki is more evil than most people seem to think, and would damage Tony or manipulate him to get at the rest of the team, playing on his insecurities. And if you don't like one of the main partners in the ship, it's going to make sailing that vessel pretty difficult. And of course, maybe you just don't see the connection and don't get what all the fuss is about. For those who find their ships informed by actual character interaction and not extrapolation, there's not a lot to go on. Yet at least. As mentioned, there are other pairs that these two are more known for, but with the rise of Stucky following Captain America the Winter Soldier and Civil War, there is a chance that FrostIron will find itself gaining some new shippers. More than it has already. As the filmverse continues to expand and more comics are made, we'll see how this pairing does. Are you guys FrostIron shippers, or is there some other Loki pairing that catches your fancy? And are there any fellow Frost Shield peeps out there? Or Warfrost? Share your fave pairings down below. This was Shipper's Guide to the Galaxy. Thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe. Check out social media to stay up to date. And as always, stay tuned, for there are as many ships out there as there are stars in the sky.